My fiancé abandoned me at the altar for a child he had hidden from me. When he begged, "Come home so we can fix this," I stayed on our honeymoon, blocked his number, and rebuilt my life alone. At first, nobody knew why Calvin was missing. We only knew he was late. He was supposed to arrive at the wedding venue at 2. The ceremony was scheduled for 3, and Calvin was never casually late to anything important. He was the kind of person who arrived at airports hours early. He double-checked reservations. He set reminders for appointments already written on the calendar. So when 2 o'clock passed, I assumed he had been delayed. At 2:15, I told myself he was helping Trevor, his best man, deal with some last-minute problem. At 2:30, Hazel entered the bridal room with her phone pressed against her chest. "He isn't answering." She tried to say it casually, but her face gave her away. I was sitting in front of the mirror while one of my friends fixed a loose section of my hair. "Try Trevor." I already did. And? Straight to voicemail. I looked at her through the mirror. "They're probably driving." That's what I thought. She didn't sound convinced. The ceremony area overlooked a small lake. White flowers lined the wooden aisle, and the arch Calvin and I had chosen stood at the front of the room. It had snowed the night before. From the bridal room window, everything outside looked clean and still. Inside, more than 100 people were waiting for us to begin our married life. By 2:45, Calvin's mother, Valerie, had started calling him. His brother, Spencer, was walking between the parking lot and the main building. My brother, Gavin, asked someone to drive along the road leading to the venue in case Calvin's car had broken down. Hazel quietly checked local accident reports. There was nothing. At 3, the wedding coordinator stepped into the room. She had been cheerful all morning. Now she looked as if she was choosing every word carefully. "We can delay the ceremony," she said. "Everyone understands that unexpected things happen." Unexpected things. Flat tires were unexpected. Dead phones were unexpected. A groom disappearing on his wedding day felt like a choice. I picked up my phone and called Calvin myself. It rang once, then went to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. On the 3rd attempt, I left a message. "Calvin, everyone is waiting. I don't know what's happening, but you need to call me. Even if something is wrong. Especially if something is wrong." My voice sounded calm. That frightened me more than if I had been crying. At 3:15, guests began whispering. At 3:30, the coordinator brought me water I couldn't drink. At 3:40, Spencer entered the bridal room. I had known Spencer before I started dating Calvin. He was the one who introduced us, and for 3 years he had joked that he deserved credit for our relationship. That afternoon, he couldn't look me in the eye. "Have you heard from him?" I asked. "No. What about Trevor?" "Nothing. Did Calvin say anything to you?" Spencer shook his head. I watched his face. "You're sure?" "I swear, Mia. If I knew something, I would tell you." He looked frightened, but not guilty. At 4, exactly 1 hour after the ceremony should have begun, I stood up. Hazel caught my arm. "What are you doing?" "I'm telling everyone." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do. The coordinator can make an announcement. I'm not letting a stranger tell our families that my fiancé disappeared." Hazel's eyes filled with tears. Mine were still dry. I walked out of the bridal room and toward the ceremony area. When the doors opened, every guest stood. That was the worst part. They thought the wedding was finally starting. People smiled. Phones were raised. My aunt pressed a hand to her chest. Then everyone realized I was alone. The music never started. I walked down the aisle without it. My heels struck the wooden floor loudly enough that I heard every step. At the front of the room, I stood beneath the flower-covered arch Calvin and I had selected together. A microphone had been placed nearby for our vows. I picked it up. "I'm sorry you've all been waiting." My voice echoed through the room. No one moved. "Calvin isn't here. We haven't been able to reach him, and I don't know where he is." Someone gasped. Valerie lowered her head. "There isn't going to be a wedding today." The sentence came out cleanly. No shaking. No sobbing. Just the truth. The reception has already been paid for. The food is ready and the bar is open. Please stay if you can. Eat, drink, and spend time together. I don't want everything to go to waste. I lowered the microphone. For several seconds, nobody knew what to do. Then Hazel walked toward me. My other friends followed. They surrounded me before I had to walk back through the room alone. The reception should have been unbearable. Somehow, my friends refused to let it become a funeral for my relationship. They spoke to the DJ and changed the music. They encouraged everyone to eat. One friend drove home and returned with a projector and a game console. Within an hour, the children and teenagers were competing against each other while their parents watched. Someone began taking ridiculous pictures with the disposable cameras from the tables. People danced. The cake was cut. From across the room, it might have looked like an ordinary party. Only the empty chair beside mine revealed what had happened. Valerie found me near the bar. Her makeup had run down her face. She took both of my hands. I am so sorry. This isn't your fault. I don't understand what he's doing. Neither do I. I raised him better than this. You didn't make this decision, Valerie. She started crying harder. I put my arms around her. It felt backward. I was standing there in my wedding dress, but I was comforting the groom's mother. For much of the evening, she stayed close to me. Around 7, I decided I wanted to get drunk. Not slightly drunk. I wanted to drink until I forgot why I was wearing white. I ordered 2 shots. Before the bartender could hand them to me, Spencer appeared beside us. Give her one, he said. I turned toward him. I didn't ask you. I know. Then don't interfere. You haven't eaten since this morning. I'm aware. If you drink both of those now, you'll be sick. Maybe I don't care. His expression softened. You might care when people start filming. I looked around. Several guests had their phones out, recording the party. Spencer lowered his voice. I'm not trying to control you. I don't want the worst night of your life uploaded somewhere because you were too hurt to notice. That stopped me. He pushed a plate of food toward me. Eat something first. Then drink whatever you want. Just don't give strangers another piece of this day. I wanted to argue, but he was right. So I ate. I drank enough to dull the sharpest edges, but not enough to lose control. By 11, most of the older guests had left. I stood near the gift table and asked people to take their presents home. Several refused. One of Calvin's aunts hugged me and told me to keep the blender she had bought. You're going to need smoothies more than he does, she said. It was the first time I laughed all day. The sound surprised me. Hazel offered to stay with me that night, but I told her I wanted to be alone. The hotel suite had been booked for Calvin and me. Flowers had been placed beside the bed. A bottle of champagne sat unopened on the table. The hotel had left a card congratulating us on our marriage. I stood in the middle of the room wearing my wedding dress and felt as though I had entered someone else's life. Calvin's suitcase wasn't there. Of course it wasn't. He had never arrived. I checked my phone. There were still no messages from him. I called 3 more times. Every call went to voicemail. After the 3rd attempt, I sent a message to the relatives and friends who were still searching. Stop calling him. He knows we're looking for him. He has chosen not to answer. Then I placed the phone face down. I removed my dress, hung it over a chair, and climbed into bed wearing a hotel robe. I slept for less than 2 hours. When I woke up, sunlight was coming through the curtains. For a few seconds, I forgot what had happened. Then I saw the dress. My phone had 17 missed calls. 5 were from Calvin. Several were from Trevor. The rest came from Calvin's friends. There were 9 messages from Calvin. I didn't open them. My hands began shaking so badly that I dropped the phone. He was alive. That was the first thing I understood. He hadn't been injured. He hadn't lost his phone. He hadn't spent the night unconscious in a hospital. He had chosen not to come. Hazel arrived 20 minutes after I called her. She carried coffee and a bag of breakfast food. I was sitting on the floor beside the bed. He's alive, I said. Did you speak to him? No. Did he explain? I haven't opened the messages. You don't have to read them yet. What if it was an emergency? If it was, the messages will still be there when you're ready. What if he has a reason? Hazel sat beside me. A reason won't erase what he did. Calvin called while she was speaking. His name appeared on the screen. I watched until the call ended. Then Trevor called. I handed the phone to Hazel. Tell him I don't want to speak to either of them. She answered. I could hear Trevor talking quickly. Hazel interrupted him. She is safe. She is not speaking to Calvin today. Trevor said something else. No. You don't get to decide when she hears him out. Her expression changed. What do you mean you can explain? I stood. What is he saying? Hazel held up one hand. You had all day yesterday to explain. She ended the call. What did he say? He said Calvin panicked. About what? He wouldn't tell me. I laughed once. Of course he wouldn't. Calvin and I were supposed to leave for Hawaii that afternoon. The trip was 3 weeks long. It was my first major vacation and my first time traveling by plane. Calvin had handled most of the planning. The flights, the hotel, the rental car, the places he wanted us to visit. My suitcase was packed and 2 plane tickets were sitting in the airline app. For a moment, I considered canceling everything. Then I imagined sitting at home while everyone waited for an explanation. I imagined Calvin arriving at the apartment and asking me to listen before I had even processed what he had done. I'm still going, I said. Hazel stared at me. Today? Yes. Are you sure? No. It was the most honest answer I had given since Calvin disappeared. Because I had never flown before, my first instinct was to ask Spencer to come. It wasn't romantic. I trusted him, and he had traveled several times. He knew how airports worked, and he had been to Hawaii before. When I mentioned it, Hazel immediately shook her head. You cannot take Calvin's brother on the trip that was supposed to be your honeymoon. It isn't a honeymoon anymore. That won't matter to people who want to turn this into gossip. I don't care what they think. You will when they start claiming you replaced Calvin with his brother. My stomach tightened. That isn't what this is. I know. Spencer knows. But you don't need that attached to everything else. She was right. I called Spencer, but I didn't invite him. I need help, I said. With what? The airport. I don't know what I'm doing. He didn't laugh. He explained how early I should arrive, where to check my bag, what to expect at security, and how to find the correct gate. He stayed on the phone while I checked in and downloaded my boarding pass. You'll be okay, he said. I don't feel okay. You don't have to feel okay to get on the plane. Before we ended the call, he added, I'm sorry. You didn't do this. He's my brother. He's also responsible for his own decisions. Spencer was quiet. I don't know what happened. Neither did I. I contacted the airline before leaving the hotel. Because Calvin's ticket was in his name, I couldn't transfer it, use its value, or make changes without his authorization. I left his seat unused. Then I paid to upgrade my own ticket. It cost more than I normally would have spent, but I wanted one decision that belonged completely to me. Hazel drove me to the airport. I wore jeans, a sweater, and the shoes I had worn to the rehearsal dinner. My wedding dress stayed inside its garment bag until Gavin collected it from the hotel. At the entrance, Hazel hugged me. You can still change your mind. I know. You can stay with me. I know. Call me before you read his messages. I'll try. She pulled back and studied my face. You don't have to protect anyone today. That sentence followed me through the airport. I checked my suitcase. I passed through security. I found the gate. Every step felt harder than it should have because Calvin had always handled things like that. But I managed. When I reached my seat, I turned off my phone. As the plane began moving, my body finally gave up. I cried quietly beneath the blanket a flight attendant handed me. I cried for the ceremony. For Valerie apologizing for her son. For every guest who had watched me announce that there would be no wedding. Most of all, I cried because part of me still wanted Calvin to have an explanation powerful enough to repair everything. I knew no explanation could. I wanted one anyway. By the time I landed, I was exhausted. The airport was crowded and warm. I followed the signs. I collected my suitcase. I found the shuttle to the hotel. I did all of it without Calvin. When I reached my room, I placed my suitcase beside the bed and walked onto the balcony. The ocean was visible beyond the buildings. The sky was turning orange. It should have been the first sunset of our honeymoon. Instead, it was the first evening after the life I had planned disappeared. I poured a glass of wine. Then I opened Calvin's messages. The first said, I'm sorry. The second said, I know there is no excuse for what I did. The third was longer. Something happened. I found out something about my past, and I didn't know how to tell you. Please let me explain. Then came the message that changed everything. I found out I have a son. I read the words several times. Calvin explained that Lydia, his childhood girlfriend, had contacted him 2 weeks before the wedding. She had returned with an 8-year-old boy named Noah. Lydia believed Calvin was Noah's father. Calvin had taken a DNA test without telling me. Trevor knew. The result had arrived on the morning of our wedding. Calvin was Noah's father. According to Calvin, he had driven to Lydia's home because he needed to meet his son. He said he became overwhelmed. He said he lost track of time. He said he couldn't bring himself to call me. He said part of him wanted to become the father Noah deserved. Then he sent me a picture. Noah was sitting beside him on a couch. They had the same eyes, the same shape to their faces, even the same nervous half-smile. I opened Valerie's social media page and found an old photograph of Calvin at around the same age. The resemblance was undeniable. A child had discovered his father. Calvin had discovered his son. That was enormous. But Calvin had known for 2 weeks that it was possible. For 2 weeks, he had attended appointments with me. He had reviewed the seating chart. He had practiced his vows. He had watched me pack for our honeymoon. He had kissed me the night before the wedding and told me he couldn't wait to see me walk down the aisle, all while hiding something that could alter both of our lives. I called Hazel. She answered immediately. I read the messages. What happened? He has a son. Hazel was silent. With who? Lydia. The girlfriend he had before me. Did he only find out yesterday? The result came yesterday. That isn't what I asked. I closed my eyes. He knew the child might be his 2 weeks ago. And he said nothing? No. What did he do during those 2 weeks? He didn't say. Did Trevor know? Yes. Hazel muttered something under her breath. He said he always wanted a family, I whispered. Her voice softened. You were going to be his family. That was when I finally broke. For 3 years, Calvin and I had talked about children. We had discussed the kind of home we wanted. We had joked about whether we would be strict parents or embarrassing parents. I had never imagined that when Calvin was given the chance to become a father, his first instinct would be to remove me from the situation. My best friend, Iris, rearranged her schedule and booked a last-minute flight to join me the following evening. Before she arrived, I spent an entire day alone. I walked to a cafe near the hotel. I ordered breakfast without asking anyone what they wanted. I sat by the window and watched families cross the street carrying beach towels. Every few minutes, I checked my phone. Calvin had called 14 times. Valerie had called 6. Spencer had sent 1 message. I'm not going to defend him. I just want to know you landed safely. I replied that I had. Then I turned my phone face down. That afternoon, I walked along the beach. Calvin had planned to rent snorkeling equipment. He had booked a boat trip. He had made a list of restaurants he wanted to try. I realized how often I had allowed him to handle everything. I had always described myself as independent because I paid my share of the bills, made my own decisions, and had my own friends. But Calvin chose our hotels. He planned our weekends. He made the reservations. I had mistaken being easygoing for being completely self-sufficient. That evening, I booked a boat tour for myself. I nearly canceled it 3 times. The next morning, I went. Most of the other passengers were couples. One woman asked whether my husband had become seasick and stayed at the hotel. I'm not married, I said. The words hurt. They were also true. When Iris arrived, she found me sitting near the hotel pool wearing sunglasses even though the sun was setting. She sat beside me and handed me a bag of takeout and a small container of ice cream. You flew here carrying ice cream? I bought it nearby. I'm supportive, not reckless. I laughed. It was the first real laugh I had managed since the wedding. Calvin called again while we were eating. Iris watched his name appear on the screen. You should answer when you're ready, she said. I don't think I'll ever be ready. Then answer when you're strong enough to hang up. I waited until the 4th day. Calvin called shortly before noon. I answered from the balcony. Mia? His voice sounded exhausted. Hearing him almost made me feel relieved. For one dangerous second, I wanted him beside me. Then I remembered the microphone in my hand and the room full of people waiting for him. Tell me what happened. Lydia contacted me 2 weeks ago. I know. She said Noah might be mine. I didn't believe her at first. But you believed her enough to take a test. Yes. And you told Trevor. I needed someone to talk to. But not me. I didn't want to upset you if it wasn't true. You were protecting yourself. That isn't fair. I laughed once. You left me standing in a wedding dress in front of everyone we know. Don't speak to me about fair. He went silent. Why didn't you call? I couldn't. You had a phone. I didn't know what to say. You could have said the wedding was postponed. I thought I could still make it. You were more than an hour late. I panicked. You made a choice. He started crying. I had heard Calvin cry only twice during our relationship. It didn't soften me. It made me angry. I received the result that morning, he said. I called Trevor, then I drove to Lydia's house. What time? Around 10. You were supposed to arrive at the venue at 2. I know. What happened during those 4 hours? I met Noah. Lydia and I talked about what we were supposed to do next. Did you tell her you were getting married? She already knew. Did she ask you to stay? No. Did she ask you to miss the wedding? No. Then why did you? He hesitated. I didn't know how to leave. You walked into her house willingly. You could have walked out. I had just met my son. I'm not blaming Noah. I know. No, I don't think you do. Your son is not the reason you abandoned me. You abandoned me because you decided I didn't deserve the truth. That isn't what happened. Then tell me what happened. Calvin breathed heavily into the phone. I saw Lydia and Noah together. He looked like me. He already knew things about me because she had told him stories. I felt like I had missed his entire life. You did miss it. I know. And that was painful. I understand that. You do. I would have understood all of it if you had told me. I didn't know if you would stay. So you made sure I couldn't. That isn't what I wanted. What did you want? He remained silent. Are you going back to Lydia? No. Do you still love her? I don't know. There it was. The phrase Calvin used when the truth would make him look worse. Did anything happen between you? No. Did you kiss her? No. Did you want to? Silence. Calvin. I was confused. What confused you? I looked at them and part of me thought maybe that was the family I was supposed to have. My chest tightened. He immediately tried to take it back. I didn't mean it like that. You meant it exactly like that. I was overwhelmed. You saw a woman you used to love and a child who looked like you, and suddenly the last 3 years became optional. They weren't optional. I was. No. Yes. You erased me so completely that you couldn't send one sentence. I'm asking you to come home so we can fix this. I'm not flying back because you suddenly decided you're ready to explain. Mia, please. You had 2 weeks. I was scared. So was I. I stood in front of our families and told them you weren't coming. I didn't know whether you were injured, dead, or running away. You knew exactly where I was. I love you. Maybe you do. I do. But when loving me became difficult, you hid from me. That isn't who I am. It's who you were when it mattered. He asked me not to end our engagement over the phone. I reminded him that he had ended our wedding without making a call at all. Then I hung up. I blocked his number. An hour later, Valerie called from a number I didn't recognize. I nearly ignored it. Something made me answer. Mia, she said. I am so sorry. Did you know? No. Not before the wedding. Have you met Noah? Yes. Last night. Is he Calvin's? There's no doubt. She sounded drained. Then she said, Calvin hasn't told you everything. My stomach tightened. What else is there? Valerie explained that after I left, she had forced Calvin to tell her the entire timeline. Lydia had contacted him 2 weeks before the wedding, but Calvin hadn't waited for the DNA result before meeting Noah. He had already seen him several times. He had taken Noah to an arcade. He had spent an afternoon at a park with Noah and Lydia. They had gone to dinner. Trevor had covered for him twice by telling me they were handling last-minute wedding arrangements. Calvin had begun forming a relationship with his son before receiving confirmation. I wasn't angry that he had met Noah. Noah deserved to know his father. I was angry because Calvin had let me continue preparing for our wedding while privately exploring another version of his life. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because Calvin keeps describing the wedding as one terrible moment of panic. Valerie's voice became firmer. It wasn't one moment. He made choices every day for 2 weeks. I closed my eyes. He told me he doesn't know whether he still loves Lydia. I don't think Lydia wants him back. How do you know? She told him. Valerie explained that Lydia had not returned to rebuild a relationship with Calvin. She wanted Noah to know who his father was. She hadn't asked Calvin to leave me. She hadn't asked him to miss the wedding. Calvin had created that possibility in his own head. He saw a child who looked like him and started imagining that the 3 of them could become the family he should have had, Valerie said. He confused guilt with destiny. And what was I? You were real. Her answer hurt more than I expected. You were a real relationship. A real marriage. A future that required honesty and responsibility. Why would that be less appealing? Because fantasies don't ask difficult questions. Valerie began crying again. I love my son. but I won't lie to protect him from the consequences of what he did. After that conversation, I stopped wondering whether the engagement could be repaired. Iris stayed with me for a week. Later, Hazel and my sister-in-law, Clara, joined me for several days. But I also spent time alone. I rented a car. I drove along the coast with the windows open. I got lost twice. I cried in a grocery store parking lot after accidentally buying Calvin's favorite coffee. I went to dinner alone and didn't pretend I was waiting for someone. I booked a beginner's surfing lesson and spent most of it falling into the water. The instructor asked why I kept laughing. Because I've never been this bad at something and still enjoyed it. By the second week, people back home had heard about Noah. Some relatives claimed Lydia had trapped Calvin. Others blamed her for contacting him so close to the wedding. I didn't know why she had waited so long. I didn't know what had happened between them years earlier. It also wasn't the issue. Lydia had not promised to marry me. Calvin had. The most painful message came from Trevor. He emailed because I had blocked his number. He apologized for helping Calvin hide the situation. He said Calvin had planned to tell me once the DNA result arrived. They had convinced themselves there was no reason to upset me if the test was negative. Then Trevor wrote, "I honestly thought he would still show up." That sentence stayed with me. Even the person helping Calvin lie hadn't expected him to abandon me. I replied once, "You watched me prepare for a marriage you knew might collapse. You don't get to call that protection. Do not contact me again." When I returned 3 weeks later, Gavin met me at the airport. Calvin wasn't there. He had tried asking Gavin for my flight information. Gavin refused. On the drive back, my brother kept glancing at me. "You don't have to go to the apartment today." "Yes, I do. You can stay with Clara and me." "I probably will. But I need to see it." When we arrived, Calvin's belongings were gone. Spencer and Valerie had collected them while I was away. My wedding dress hung inside the bedroom closet. The garment bag looked like a body. I closed the door. Calvin had left my engagement ring on the kitchen counter. Beside it was a handwritten letter. I didn't read it. I placed the ring and the unopened letter inside an envelope and sent them to Valerie. The following months were quieter than I expected. Most of the wedding gifts were returned. Some guests refused refunds and insisted that I keep practical items meant for the household. I donated some and kept others. The wedding photographer contacted me before sending anything. She asked whether I wanted the photographs from the reception. After thinking about it for several days, I said yes. She sent me a private gallery. There were pictures of people dancing, children playing games, Valerie holding my hands, Hazel standing beside me as I cut the wedding cake alone. In nearly every photograph, I was smiling. At first, that disturbed me. Then I understood what the pictures showed. They didn't prove I had been happy. They proved I had survived the day without allowing Calvin's absence to destroy everyone else's memories of it. Spencer checked on me twice. The second time, I told him we needed distance. He nodded. "You're still one of my closest friends." "I know, but looking at me reminds you of him." "Yes, I understand." Before leaving, he said, "I told Calvin he lost the best thing that ever happened to him." A few months earlier, I would have needed to hear that. Now I didn't. I don't need him to believe that anymore. Spencer looked sad, but he smiled. That's probably a good thing. 6 months after the wedding, Valerie asked to meet me for coffee. I nearly declined. I still missed her. She looked tired when she arrived. She told me Calvin had moved into a small apartment and was seeing Noah regularly. He was attending parenting classes and therapy. He and Lydia were not together. Lydia had never wanted to restart their old relationship. She had only wanted Noah to know his father. Calvin had eventually admitted that he had built the romantic possibility in his own head. He thought discovering Noah meant he had to recreate the family he missed, Valerie said. And now? Now he understands that becoming Noah's father never required becoming Lydia's partner. I stirred my coffee. Does he blame me? No. He blames himself. I expected that to feel satisfying. It didn't. Calvin's regret couldn't give me back the wedding. It couldn't erase the moment I had to tell everyone he wasn't coming. But I no longer needed his regret to prove that leaving him was the right decision. Before we parted, Valerie asked whether I would ever speak to him again. I don't know. For once, those words were honest instead of evasive. A week later, Calvin sent me one final email. He wrote that therapy had forced him to understand how many decisions he had made before missing the wedding. He admitted he had confused the shock of discovering Noah with a sign that he was supposed to rebuild a life with Lydia. He said he had been terrified that if he came to the venue and saw me, he would marry me, while wondering whether he had failed his son. He still didn't fully understand that no one had asked him to choose between us. I would never have asked him to reject his child. The choice had always been between honesty and deception. Calvin chose deception. At the end of the email, he asked for one conversation. Not to get back together. Not to defend himself. He said he wanted to apologize while looking me in the eye. I waited 3 days before responding. I wrote, "You did not lose me because you discovered you had a son. You lost me because you decided I was the one person who didn't deserve to know. I hope you become the father Noah needs. But I will never build a life with someone who disappears when life becomes complicated." I didn't agree to meet him. A year after the wedding, I returned to Hawaii. This time, there was no unused ticket. No wedding dress waiting in a closet. No phone filled with unanswered explanations. I booked the flight myself. I chose the hotel myself. I even returned to the same boat tour I had taken during that first trip. When the airline employee asked whether anyone else was traveling with me, I smiled. No, just me. The answer no longer frightened me. I still think about the woman who stood beneath that wedding arch and told everyone there would be no ceremony. She believed being left alone was the worst thing that could happen to her. She didn't yet understand that being alone and being abandoned were not the same thing. Calvin found his son on our wedding day. I found out I could build a life without him. But sometimes I still wonder whether refusing to meet him was strength or simply the only revenge I had left. Was I right to deny him one final face-to-face conversation, or did he lose the right to ask me for closure when he left me waiting at the altar?